guys, hello and welcome back to the High Man podcast. Today is Tuesday the 3rd of January 2023, 15:40, 20 to 4 in the afternoon. Welcome back. This is episode 21, hosted by yours truly, Peter, and me, Caleb. Hope you guys had a good New Year and a good Christmas. How are you, Pete?
Yeah, pretty good. Start the new year off with a good episode, I hope.
Yeah, should be fun. It's going to be a bit of a free-flowing one. We're going to just discuss some different topics and just get some great conversation going.
Yeah.
And that'll be it, I guess. 2023 is ahead of us now. We are in the I think I'll be turning 22 this year, so are you. So
yeah.
It's not really a big deal turning 22.
It's a bit of a random age.
It's a bit of random. One of my sisters is turning 27 or 28, and it's like, that's nearly 30. That's like pretty old.
Yeah, we've got a while to wait before that.
We do, Frank.
We'll have 1 million subscribers by then anyway. So.
Yeah, maybe like a bill.
Yeah.
Maybe first channel to 1 billion. Oh, you never know. So what do you want to discuss today, Pete?
Yeah, so there was some stuff I was thinking about because I've just been reading Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. And there was one chapter in it where basically the point of it was you should care more about effort than anything, that putting in the effort should be enough in and of itself, not being so attached to kind of the results you get. And he gave an example of a story which I didn't quite agree with at first, but it brought up some interesting topics to talk about. So this dude, I wanted to say his name was Belarusius, I think that was his name. Belisarius, I want to say. Maybe. But basically, he was a Roman general, and apparently he was one of the work he did as a general was like really high quality. Like he always did the right thing, and he was really good in that role, and he handled his duties very well. And the point the book was making was that he didn't really have much of an ego. Like there was maybe chances he could have taken more status or personal achievement, but he decided not to because he was just fussed over doing what was right, which is all well and good. However, the bit I, at first had a bit of a problem was it spoke about how how things didn't end up going so well for him. So the emperor at the time, there ended up being conspiracies that he was accused of conspiring against the emperor. So he was punished for this, and he lost his position, and he lost everything. And I think he might have got he might have regained that stuff and then lost it again or something. But I mean, the details don't matter so much. It was more kind of the point the book was making was that effort should be enough within itself. But to back that up, it gave a story of this example of someone who did put in the right effort and did all the right things, but his life turned out shit. So I kind of thought it wasn't the best example. Like after reading that, you went like, "Oh, that really makes me want to do the right thing no matter what." But then I was kind of thinking about it more and about how it kind of relates to Stoicism. Obviously, Ryan Holiday, the guy who wrote the book, writes about Stoicism. So kind of the idea from Stoicism is that you shouldn't be attached to external things that are outside your control. And I think the reason for that is because you're outsourcing your sense of contentment and fulfillment to things which you can't control. And in that case, you're never really going to be able to be happy or content because, one, you can't make the thing happen that you want to happen. And two, even if you were to attain it, because it's not in your control, it can be taken away. Whereas if you let go of your attachment to that, then and you're only attached to what is in your control, which is simply doing the right thing, acting in a virtuous way, if that's all that matters to you, then it's a much better way of, one, having control over your own mind because you're not outsourcing the way you feel to external things. But also, you can just live a more fulfilling life if that's what your values are attached to. So I guess given all of that, what are your thoughts on how much we should value external things and whether it's a good idea to kind of move away from valuing that and simply focusing on effort, as the book would say, as opposed to the reward you get from it.
Yeah. I mean, I'd sway initially to the idea that rewarding yourself with effort rather than actual external like pleasures, let's say, that seems like better on the face value of how someone should live their life. But given like the way humans are, it does seem necessary to have some sort of like some sort of actual reward that shows the actuality, that like it shows the actualization of someone's effort and like dedication. Like, albeit it might be power and money and influence or dominance, but like those like vices, let's say, they're the sort of things that are like driven so many influential people in like the history of mankind to help us as a community and civilization to keep going forward and strive forward. But I guess maybe the people that did that, like the people that created these amazing inventions, like in terms of technology, medicine, infrastructure and stuff, they possibly could have done that with the idea that they should live their life in contentment with effort rather than with reward. So maybe those things could have happened, but in my mind, they probably happened because people wanted the reward for what they were doing.
Yeah.
And because we have a history of that, it seems proven to be able to keep our species advancing forward.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of tension there for me anyway, because on a large scale, it seems like the reward has been able to push us to such a great level where we are now.
Yeah, as humans, we're naturally oriented towards pursuing things like status and whatever. I guess it comes down to evolutionary reasons.
Yeah.
But we're like biologically and psychologically driven towards these things naturally. And yeah, I felt that tension kind of reading the book, The Ego is the Enemy, because ego is kind of like a fundamental source that can give you drive if you have ambition and you want to fulfill it. But I mean, the book makes a lot of points kind of counter to that, but I think there certainly is an argument there. But it had me thinking about Stoicism in terms of your own mental state and about how if you attach your sense of value to external things, whether that be money or status or other people's opinions or feelings towards you, then you're outsourcing your sense of value and sense of contentment and your happiness to other people. Whereas I think really at the core of Stoicism, it's about taking back control of your own mind and being able to control yourself internally much better than if you outsource what you think is valuable, how much people like you, for example. If that's something you value, then it will be impossible for you to gain any state of internal control over your mind, because it's always going to be dependent on something outside of you.
Right.
So in context of kind of doing the right thing, I think if we can attach our value more simply to doing the right thing and kind of dispense with our desires for external rewards, then it can give us a lot more of a peace of mind, and it can allow us to say orientate towards the right thing. Wherewith, if you're pursuing external things, then perhaps it could become corrupted in a way where you take the extra money, even if it goes against your values, for example.
Yeah, I hear that, but then what about, like you said, you should strive to do the right thing regardless of these external opinions. For example, how do you know you're doing the right thing without coming to a consensus that's agreed upon by, like, let's say, your immediate community?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess, I mean, that comes down to a question of how do you know you're doing the right thing anyway. I wouldn't necessarily say if you are driven by other people's opinions, for example, that makes it any more likely that you'll be doing the right thing. So I think making a conscious effort to do the right thing regardless of these external factors, will put you on the way to doing the right thing, because that's what you've set as your explicit aim. And I guess if you're honest with yourself, and perhaps you have a good value system, which maybe comes from being influenced by different philosophies. Like in terms of doing the right thing, we spoke about on the podcast what Stoicism maybe thought about that, or what Nietzsche thought about that, in terms of the way Nietzsche thinks about it, becoming the higher man, rather than focusing on comfort and ease and pleasure. We focus on creative achievement, self-actualization. Perhaps that can be your value system, or it could be something different, maybe inspired by religion or whatever other philosophy that resonates with you. But I think the point is, when you're able to realize that things like that these external things are actually superficial, and stop attaching your sense of value to it, then it does allow you to really live in accordance with what you believe to be right, and you can be in harmony with that. Whereas, okay, you might have both things. You might have this value system. Oh, I believe this is what good people do, and this is what bad people do. But I think if you are attached to external things, where the decision would come between gaining status or doing the right thing, your attachment to gaining status will only ever serve to corrupt you to not do the right thing. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I hear that. Do you think there could be a bit of disparity between, like, if you're trying to focus on what you think is the right thing, what happens if what you think is the right thing ends up negatively affecting a large group of people? And obviously, maybe if you had other people's opinions about your actions in mind, you might not have done that.
Yeah.
These are quite abstract like ideas and like examples, but it seems strange that through trying to like sieve out other people's opinions and focus on what you think is right, in my mind that can sometimes become self-serving, and people can possibly like do things in a selfish way. Whereas if they did sort of care about the opinions of other people, they might take their actions' consequences on those people into account more, and that could create more harmony in the end.
Yeah, I think that does make sense, and I wouldn't say detaching your value from external things necessarily, because an external thing is other people's opinion. So immediately I can understand like why you say that. Like, if you were to completely ignore people's opinions, then you might not be able to realise that you were wrong in what you thought.
Yeah. When
you thought you were doing the right thing. So I think, but the fact of letting go of caring about other people's opinions in and of themselves, I don't think that necessarily stops you from caring about other people's opinions when it's in service of the thing you value most, which is doing the right thing. So if you have this goal about doing the right thing, if you realise that other people's opinions are valid, if they make, if they're relevant to what the right thing is, kind of. So I don't know. Does that make sense? Like, so you believe this thing is right.
Yeah.
Your highest value is doing what's right. You don't care about people's opinions. It's a bit paradoxical, but you should take people's opinions into account if they affect the highest thing.
Yeah.
But not necessarily if you're just taking their opinions into account on their own. If you're directly pursuing, I think it'd be wrong to directly pursue getting good opinions from other people.
No, I hear that. I mean, maybe going against what I was saying, like Nietzsche says, to be someone that becomes a higher man, you need to kind of run the risk of almost offending other people, don't you? Like forgetting all these stupid, like virtuous things just because you're a coward. Like do the right thing because it's the right thing, and that might offend people. And like that is a pathway that gets you to being a higher man, although you do run the risk of other people getting their feelings hurt. So maybe in terms of Stoicism, forgetting about other people's opinions and focusing on what you think is right, even if it does hurt someone's feelings, it's fine. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because you're doing it for a greater good that, realistically, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't care about what this individual feels in that emotion, in those emotions. Because then coming back to another Stoic thing is, you can't control other people's emotions. Mm-hmm. The way they react to what you do is not up to you, because, like, how could it ever be?
Yeah, yeah. And as I was saying, if you attach a sense of value to that, if you attach your happiness to whether you're making other people happy, you don't have control over that. So you're never going to have control over your own mind.
Yeah.
I think that was the key thing for me. If you're able to detach from these external things, then it allows you to gain control over your own mind, which I think is maybe the biggest benefit of all of it.
Yeah, I do see that. The thing that comes to my mind then is, like, in terms of, like, long term, when you end up having a relationship with your partner,
mm-hmm.
like, this is one of the problems I've heard people talk about with Stoicism a few times, like we've discussed it maybe once or twice, but, like, it kind of can seem a bit cold-blooded,
yeah,
and a little bit emotionless.
Yeah,
that if you're trying to live your life in a good way, possibly fall in love with this person, but if they don't love you, you're gonna try not to let you affect you.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to be able to truly connect with that person on, like, a deep level where you're going to have a happy relationship for a few years at least? Yeah, I think you probably could, but it just seems a little bit strange at times.
Yeah, it's this is, like, I think, quite a common criticism of Stoicism, and I've seen this explained as so in terms of attachment in Stoicism, they say you shouldn't view things as if you own them, and then when you lose them, that you've lost them. Right. You should view it as they've returned to the original state, which was not. So I guess in the context of a relationship, you know, that the argument would be that you can still love someone without necessarily being attached to them in that way, but it's kind of a hard thing. I do think that's really possible, to love someone without being attached to them. Maybe it's not entirely, but
I mean, I think I've never had, like, a proper relationship, so I can't really give any first-hand experience and, like, judgment on it. But, like, when I used to fancy girls, I used to fancy them, and then I'd stop fancying them, but I still care about them. Mm-hmm. I still, like, want them to be sound and, like, have a good time. So I feel like I can sort of agree with that. But obviously, when you grow up, loving someone is a lot, not necessarily different, but it's a lot deeper and it's a lot more meaningful. Mm-hmm. And if you do love someone, in my eyes, love is desire, and desire is attachment, isn't it?
Yeah.
In terms of, like, well, that's what Buddhists say about it, and I agree. So if you do love someone but you're not attached to them, like, that just doesn't add up.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. When I was thinking about this, it's interesting you bring up desire. That makes me remember something that I kind of realised with this, that I don't think you don't have the choice to let go of all desires, but you do somewhat have a choice to choose what desires you have. So I think, like the Stoics, it's not that they don't have any desire, mm-hmm. but it's that their highest desire is to act in a virtuous way, fundamentally, and to have control over their own minds. But yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult trying to figure out whether you'd really be able to love someone without being attached in that way.
Yeah, like you see in movies, if you truly love someone, let them go. I can hear it, but if you truly love someone, like, don't you want to try and fight for that love? Because if you do truly love something, you're going to be willing to fight for it. I guess that love, but then it gets into the question: can love only be? Is is love like only a two-way street, or is it a one-way street at times? Like, can you truly love someone without them loving you?
Yeah, I guess it would be possible to.
I guess you could say
necessarily.
Yeah, the easy example that comes to my mind is a newborn baby. Every parent, well, I hope every parent, is completely in love with that new child, but that child has no idea what the fuck's going on, so they can't love them back, can they?
But I don't know. I think it is maybe possible to love and not be overly attached, although, it's a difficult one. Maybe maybe you need to think more about that one.
Maybe it's just something that would take time to come to that point for someone. Like that might be something you're aiming for, is to be able to love people without being attached and sad when you're not with them and all these other things. And maybe progress can be made. Maybe it's not as simple as you are this or you aren't it. Maybe it's more of a spectrum where eventually over time you can learn to live that way.
Yeah, it comes back to kind of a more broad question of, so we've been talking about it in the context of love, but it's more of a broad question of how much control do you actually have over what you're attached to? Because, I've been thinking about these Stoic principles and wanting to integrate them more into my own life. But I'll ask you, how much control do you think you have over your attachment to things? And is it actually possible or doable for most people, or for anyone for that matter, to become, to reach a state of detachment from external things and only being attached and having kind of complete control over your internal state? Like, how attainable do you think that is?
I think it's attainable for almost everybody, but I think it's almost in the same category as being fit and healthy, where there's so many people in the world that are just overweight and unhealthy and don't work out, and they think they need this personal trainer or this like motivational speaker to help them get on this journey and self-actualize what they want to be, whereas all it realistically is just a bit of hard work and dedication, and most people aren't willing to do that, so they fall into the trap of eating unhealthy, not working out, being attached to their phone all day, myself included in some of those examples. Like, it's difficult, but it's definitely achievable for every single person. It's just the work that is required. It's not desirable.
And that applies, so you said, to like being attached to your phone there, but I guess that would also apply to being attached to anything external, so being attached to other people's opinions. If you make a conscious effort to let go of that and to value other things more, then you think you can have control.
Do you think that might be one of the things that's almost harder? Because obviously there's a lot of people with like anxiety and this like overwhelming sense of like anxiousness when they like need to go out in public and stuff. Do you think maybe that's out of the vices that there are, like eating unhealthy, being materialistic, being addicted to your phone or video games, and then caring about other people's opinions? In my mind, the opinions of others might be one of the harder things for people to get over. Because we are just such social animals. We do care so much about the judgment from others. So would you say that's maybe one of the harder things to get over?
Yeah, I'd definitely say there is. It's no, it's not as obvious as what other, of how to let go of your attachment to other things. Like you mentioned there, to like junk food or going on your phone too much. With those things, it's fairly straightforward how you lose your attachment to them. You just need to come up with a process to stop doing them. Whereas it doesn't really seem that simple for other people's opinions. But do you think it is?
I think it's a complicated area that I don't understand much about. But I do fall into the category of just believing certain things I see online. And one of the things I believe is like Wim Hof, like his idea of cold exposure and his breathing technique. I've not done his breathing technique. Like, I've done it once, but I've never like consistently done it. But I do know the benefits of just cold exposure. And like people that I've seen online who like do their ice bath dunks every day. There's one guy who said like he used to be depressed and like really anxious, and like doing this every day, it's not cured him, but it's reduced it by like a significant percentage where he feels a lot happier in his everyday life.
Yeah.
And then like, there's people I know that are quite close to me that like suffer with like anxiety or these other mental illnesses, and I've not said it to them because it's not really my place, but in my mind, if they just did cold exposure every day, I feel like that would help them a lot.
Yeah.
So it is sort of easy.
Yeah.
There's easy steps you can take that can help. They won't necessarily cure it, but I do think life is a lot simpler at times than we make it out to be.
Yeah, we simply do the right things, or we do things like cold exposure. Yeah, it's interesting you bring it up as an example because, you know, like I wouldn't say that's that obvious to people, like for them to start doing that to help their mental health. But do you think that's a big tool people can use for their mental health?
I think it is. I think like just scientifically, like the fact that if you do the cold exposure, it boosts your dopamine level for nearly 2.5 hours by twice the baseline level or something.
Yeah.
I'm not too sure what the crash would be like that because it's always such an extended period of time. Does it kind of make the crash a little bit less significant? Probably not, but yeah. So that it just does make you feel better, and the sense that you get out of making yourself do something that's uncomfortable is the sense of achievement. And when you have a sense of achievement, you feel happier about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like it does work.
Yeah.
Like, to be fair, like you said, like not many people would necessarily know that. Like they would have heard about cold exposure for the health benefits physically. Because obviously athletes do cold plunges. But maybe it's not necessarily widely known that cold exposure actually does help with these mental conditions.
To be fair, I definitely believe that the biggest benefits of cold exposure are psychological. Like you said there about the boost in dopamine it gives you, which obviously makes you feel, it improves your mood. But I think one of the other biggest benefits is it builds your stress tolerance. Because basically when you're exposed to the cold, it's an extremely stressful stimulus. Mm-hmm. And like neurologically what's going on is loads of adrenaline is released. And in doing that, you're learning how to cope with high adrenaline states.
Right.
Which is, I learned off Andrew Huberman, that's how cold exposure can increase your stress resilience as well. So that's another impact. So
if
on your mental health.
If you practice cold exposure and then you have anxiety when you're about to go to school or something, when you're in that stage of becoming anxious before you go to school, you might just revert back to breathing. Yeah, because you're so used to it in the cold.
Yeah, you've just gained more exposure to that kind of state. I'm not even sure if you'd necessarily have to do anything, but I think
right.
Yeah, like in psychotherapy, like exposure is a big thing. If people are afraid of things or they're not good at handling them, like the main way to teach them to overcome that is through exposure.
Yeah, making them face it and just become comfortable with it.
Yeah,
right.
So I think the stress from cold showers. Because stress is kind of this general thing of like high cortisol, high adrenaline, that type of thing. So dealing with different states of that same nature in completely different contexts is still useful to you. It's interesting that you say that in general doing difficult things is inherently rewarding to people and makes them feel better about themselves and makes them improve their mental health. Why do you think that is?
I think a lot of people will. I think most humans have this innate sense of guilt about their lives. Maybe it comes from, if you believe in religion like that, is it the original sin or something? Maybe that's what it stems from. I don't know, because you don't really see animals having this innate sense of guilt, but I feel like most humans have this innate sense of guilt where they know if they're on the right path or not, even if they don't consciously know it. Subconsciously, their body understands that they're moving towards a goal, or they're kind of just floating through life, being a bit hedonistic and not really giving a shit about anything. Yeah, especially themselves. And I think when you do these difficult tasks and you force yourself to be uncomfortable, like whether it be training, eating healthy, hiking, like it could be anything, like working hard at school for like 3 hours a day or something. Doing those things gives you a sense of achievement, and it stops you having this sense of guilt.
Yeah.
And it might not even be that this sense of achievement makes you happy. It might be the fact that you're not feeling this sense of guilt just makes you not unhappy.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's why it can be so beneficial for every single human.
Yeah.
That's just my idea on it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Why.
I guess that sense of guilt you're talking about, like a way of describing that would be the guilt you feel from knowing you're not living up to your potential.
Yeah.
And I think it's mirrored in a lot of different ideas, like in terms of Nietzsche's idea of the higher man. A key goal is self-actualization, which is becoming who you could be. And another example is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where basically at the bottom, I'm not sure if people know it, they can Google it if they want, because I can't be asked that it. But Maslow's hierarchy of needs, so basically at the bottom you have things which you need the most, but as you go up, they're things you find more fulfilling. So at the bottom it's got like food and shelter and water, and then it's got security, and then in the middle it's got social connection and relationships, then it's got status and achievement or something, then it's got self-actualization as the highest goal. So perhaps that's how you achieve the highest sense of meaning and fulfillment, through self-actualization. And there's an analogy actually this has made me think of, which relates to why the most difficult thing will be the thing that makes you feel that the most, because it's a common like mythological motif that the thing you most want to find will be where you least want to look. Like the biggest treasure will be protected by the largest dragon, and there's also a common mythological story of, it is demonstrated in Pinocchio of finding your father in the belly of the whale. So in like the darkest, deepest place you can go, that's where you find the thing you most want to find. And the significance of the father in the belly of the whale is that's where you find the ancestral hero, because and this has been shown, I think, on a gene level, that when you take on difficult challenges, new genes activate inside you, which would have remained dormant had you never taken the challenge. So that is you physically unlocking the potential inside of your genes.
Right. Is that what is referred to as an ancestral hero? Yeah,
that's why you find your father there, because that's, everything your ancestors have done, like the potential, the abilities that they had, like those things genetically have been passed down to you. But you only get to realise that, to actualise that. And that's what self-actualisation is. You only get to actualise that if you take on the biggest possible challenge. That's when you get the most possible actualisation. Yeah, it's an interesting way of thinking.
I mean, the journey to self-actualisation is a difficult one, and in my mind, people know they should be on it because they have this sense of guilt. But when I would explore how to, I guess when you'd explore how to kind of improve your own standards of quality of life, there's always this theme where you need to stop judging yourself about your actions and kind of just focus on the progress forward. So there's this idea if you focus too much on your judgment, you'll just feel guilty again, and then you'll get back into that cycle. Or if you feel bad, that's the trigger, then you go for the reward, which is like the bad habit or whatever it is, and then you get the reward and then you crash again and you feel bad, and it just cycles. So there's this theme of don't judge yourself and focus more on the action and the future potential that you have. But then if you don't judge yourself, how do you know you're in the wrong? Or do you think it's there is that there's an innate sense of this is good, this is bad?
Yeah, it does kind of demonstrate this tension between being able to completely let go of the things outside your control versus allowing those things to help drive you. Because even though that action you've taken in the past that you feel guilty about, that was in your control, but it's not anymore because it's already happened.
Right.
So in terms of Stoicism, like the Stoic would say, you shouldn't worry about that. You shouldn't focus on it because it's not in your control anymore. You can't change it. So why are you going to attach your sense of worth to something you can't control? However, so I think from the Stoic point of view, acknowledging your mistakes and knowing them and knowing your flaws allows you can know that without attaching your sense of worth to that. So with this whole Stoicism thing, there's a couple of times where I've been talking about, and I think there is a bit of a tension there where it's like, can you acknowledge something? Can you love someone without being attached to them? Can you acknowledge that you've made mistakes in the past and take action to improve without attaching your sense of worth to it? So I guess there's this fundamental question of, can we take the good of things without being attached from them? And it seems as there are different examples where it seems like the right thing to do, I kind of lean towards you should be able to do it. So do you think, like we spoke about in the context of love, do you think in the context of making a past mistake, knowing that you should improve, but also not attaching your sense of value to it, do you think that's possible?
Yeah, in a bit of a strange way. I feel like you made me realise that the way you said how, although that thing you did was wrong, the fact that it's in the past is outside your control. So you shouldn't attach your sense of worth to it. I completely agree with that. And I think living by that, you can still also live by the fact that because you have knowledge of what that actually makes you feel in the future, well, not in the future, sorry, in the present and almost in the immediate future, you have control over your actions and you have control over, you have knowledge of the actions that you've already taken in life. You have knowledge of how they're going to make you feel. So you can have no attachment to the guilt that you have over a bad habit, but you do have knowledge of what that will do to you if you do it again. And you do have control over your actions in the present and the immediate future. So that although you're not attached to that feeling, you just are aware of it. And then that's like awareness is like a key, becomes a key part of your life.
Yeah, I was thinking that just awareness is maybe where the key distinction comes of being able to like feel, to, for example, have the knowledge but not necessarily be attached to the feeling. Like if you're aware and you're mindful, then you're able to attain that. And I was thinking about that with like the example of love as well. Like you might feel a certain sense of attachment or anxiety to do with that, but the way you let go of that is simply through awareness, and it kind of takes its power away from you. I was listening to Andrew Huberman's just on a podcast with Sam Harris.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just the other day, I think. And yeah, that's one of the things he was talking about. Like, if you do feel this negative emotion, or in this case, it might be that sense of attachment, if you're, through mindfulness, simply just being aware of it, it kind of takes its power away from you, because rather than trying to fight it, rather than trying to avoid it, you're kind of just existing in harmony with it. And at that point, perhaps you take the power away from it, of causing it to affect your well-being and affecting your internal state.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's weird though, because I do agree with that. When you are aware of something, it takes its power away. But then it's almost like, how does that happen? Like, let's say, for example, if you've got a bad habit of eating junk food every day, when you go to that cupboard and you take out like a chocolate bar or crisps or whatever, the fact that you're aware of that, it will make you less likely to do it, but you still almost have the urge to do it, don't you?
Yeah, Yeah, I mean the urge. I think the point is, like with meditation, like if the argument here is making that, if the argument we're making here is that through meditation you can, I think the way that works is by meditating you can have urges, but if you're simply aware of them, it takes away your need to act on them.
Yeah. Do you think maybe because when you have these urges, if you're aware of them, your body becomes more in tune with what's happening right now? Whereas if you aren't like a person that's like focusing on like self-awareness, when you have these urges, rather than like feeling like in touch with what's happening, your body almost shuts down, and when your body shuts down, it goes back to its natural urges.
Yeah.
So you carry on with that urge. Is that possibly what happens?
Yeah, you're just the puppet to the strings of your desires.
Yeah.
Whereas when you have that awareness, like what meditation gives you is the ability to detach and become aware of your emotion. Yeah, so rather than identifying with your emotions, your urges, you're able to be one step removed. Right. And yeah, I think meditation and mindfulness link actually quite directly into as part of Stoicism, because they both require that sense of detachment. They both enable that.
Yeah, so you identify the emotions rather than identifying with them. That keeps you detached, so you don't have to act on them. Interesting stuff.
Yeah.
I remember reading a book called like The Craving Mind by a guy called Judson Brewer, who's like an addiction specialist. And it's like, I haven't really acted on it, but what I got from the book is like, he just said meditation is just so beneficial because it helps you have this self-awareness. And when you want to quit this bad habit, just being aware of it helps you quit it.
Yeah.
And I didn't really understand what he meant until now.
Yeah. Yeah, you can exist with... This is something I learned from Sam Harris as well. This was a while ago, actually, on Lex Friedman, when he was on Lex Friedman's podcast. But he said, through meditation, you realise that you can have a desire, but you don't have to fulfil that desire in order for it to go away.
Mm-hmm.
I think the way a lot of us live our lives, probably myself included at different times, is we're just constantly in a perpetual state of fulfilling the next desire. And that never kind of allows you to stop and actually be content. And supposedly that's what meditation allows you to do.
Yeah.
Like, an example people give is for a non-meditator, they might have this idea, and the idea is, I'll be happy once this thing happens. But for that person, I think this was from Sam Harris again, that he could have visualised being on holiday with his mates, with his girlfriend on the beach, watching the sunset with a drink in his hand. Like, that was the thing he's always visualised. Like, once that happens, I'll be happy. And even if that was the case, the fact that happens so rarely means you probably shouldn't desire that so much.
Right.
But the problem is, even when he gets to that moment where all those desires are fulfilled, because he's in this constant state of not being able to just let go and be content, that even when he is in that moment, he's going to be like, oh, I wish something was slightly better or different. Like, there could always be something more.
Yeah. The desire almost always seems to be at the same distance away from you. No matter if you achieve that desire, there's going to be a new one that's the same distance away.
Yeah, so they might be there and they're like, oh, this would be good if I could take a picture. And then they realise their phone's battery's died, and they'd be like, oh, this would be perfect if my phone just worked. And that kind of strips away the contentment that they could have otherwise had in that moment. And I think the point with meditation is that it's not just about being able to be content in those moments. It's about being able to be content throughout your entire life and not not constantly chasing, not constantly being attached to something that is outside your control, which I guess would be how it relates to Stoicism. But if you're able to simply have that level of contentment, regardless of the external circumstances, then that would be the ideal state.
Yeah. Rather than having a lot of things that need to be satisfied in order for you to be satisfied. You just, I was going to say, you just make yourself satisfied, which seems so silly.
You just let go. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you just let go, and that brings satisfaction in itself.
Yeah, I heard it's like Sam Harris talking on the Andrew Huberman podcast. He gave this story of, he was talking about the self, and I think he was talking about how we come to realise like the self is an illusion. And to be honest, I don't really understand that, but I think the example still works just to demonstrate this point about meditation and realising a state of containment. But basically the story was that there was this Asian woman somewhere in Northern Europe, like Norway or something, and the significance of her being Asian is she doesn't speak English. Well, she doesn't speak the language there, which will become relevant later in the story. But basically, so she's on like a tourist bus where they get dropped off somewhere and they get picked up by the same bus. And then when she's out there, she changes her clothes and then she gets back on the bus. But then someone realises, like, oh, there was this woman on the bus earlier and I can't see her here now. We can't just leave her. Even though the woman is on the bus.
Yeah.
But then, so they all go out on a search party and somehow she figures out that someone's missing as well. And then, so she is looking for the person as well. And then eventually at some point, she realises that she is the missing tourist that everyone's looking for. And kind of the point there is that the way she came to realise that the way the missing tourist was found was not in the way that everyone was out searching for her. So especially for her in that example, like for the woman, like her state, she was searching for this external person and then she realised it was her. So they found the tourist, but it wasn't in the way they expected. So I think through meditation, the point of meditation is that we find the state of contentment, but we don't find it through searching for the next thing and having the next desire satisfied. We find it by realising that we don't actually need anything to be different. And in that moment, we can let go of the desire and be content.
Right. I hear what you said, the explanation you gave, but the story about the woman it doesn't really make sense in my mind. I understand how the story goes and the ending of it and all that, but so in looking for something other than herself, she found herself. Is that sort of what it is?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure because he was using the story to make a point about how the self, about how you come to realise the self is an illusion. But I was using the story because it came to mind because I just heard it the other day. But I thought it also demonstrated the point about how you find contentment through meditation, not where you necessarily expect to find it. But yeah, I don't necessarily know how the self, how it relates to the self. That's something that I'm still wrapping my head around.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a point that we can find the state of contentment, but it's not going to be through searching for more outside of ourselves. I guess would be the analogy with that story.
Yeah, I'll have to.
Yeah, maybe listen to that podcast.
Yeah, I'll probably. To be fair, I probably will.
Yeah,
is it the one with Andrew Huberman?
Yeah.
Most likely will. Shout out.
Yeah, I'm sure they really need it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think so. Anyway, but so in the past we kind of spoke about how there's a tension between pursuit and and contentment. So on one hand, you need this, like we gain fulfillment and happiness through life, through striving towards goals and achieving them, and in doing that we improve our life, but also throughout the process, through moving towards goals, we gain enjoyment from that. But on the other hand, the state of meditation is kind of letting go of that, which is of being able to let go and be content regardless, but without pursuit. And in thinking about this whole Stoicism stuff we've been talking about, I think I kind of thought of it makes sense to me how if you're able to let go of your attachment to external things and simply be focused on your own internal actions, then you can gain this sense of contentment. If your sense of value is attached to doing the right thing, for example, you can find that sense of contentment in the moment, whilst also being in pursuit of something through your right actions.
Yeah.
So that was something relevant to previous episodes that I thought of when I was thinking about Stoicism.
Yeah, 100%. It's like delayed gratification, the instant gratification, and then ultimately the gratification just becomes the process.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's exactly it. Once you attach your sense of worth to the process itself, to the actions that you're taking, then you can do the things that will make you progress. But your pleasure comes from doing the right things, not necessarily from having to attain some external reward.
Yeah.
It seems to me like that's the best way to be.
It does. In terms of doing the right thing, do you think that you could almost argue the right thing for a human to do is live like humans did years ago and live off the land locally, not be attached to these materialistic possessions, working every day towards a goal, like building your cabin or whatever, and all these things. And I feel like a lot of people would see an example of that. I was talking to you earlier about this guy called Glenn Villeneuve, who went out to Alaska and lived there for like 20 years, or 17, 20 years, built a log cabin and just hunts for his food and just lives off the land every day, hikes every day. And he was part of a program called Life Below Zero, where it's kind of like survivalist, living out in minus whatever degrees conditions. A lot of people are really attracted to that idea of going out and becoming like a nomad again. And like it's really like appealing to all these people that live like very high stress jobs and like live in these big cities where there's just so much going on and it's just not necessarily natural to humans. So almost that would be the right thing for them to do. But then on the flip side, there's a lot of people that see an example of someone living off the land and they just fucking hate the idea of it. So that's not necessarily the right thing for them to do. So I guess like my question is, how universally human is the feeling of the right thing to do? Like we all have different desires and stuff. Is there like these different? Is there these examples of truths that everyone can kind of agree on? Maybe that kind of gets into a bit of a religious sentiment, like with like the Ten Commandments and stuff. Like I think most people can agree, not killing someone's a good idea, but
I mean, some people would argue if it's for the right purpose, then
true. But like, what is the right? Is there like a example where everybody could agree on is the right thing to do?
I'd say probably not, but then that kind of brings the question: why not? Like, why can we not come to a consensus about what is the right thing to do.
Yeah. Do you think maybe it's got to do with having some sort of external force? Like I was watching a movie the other day, and it was like, what they call it? It's like called Live Die Repeat with Tom Cruise, and there's some meteor hits the Earth, and these aliens come onto the Earth, and all of humanity has to get together to defeat them, basically.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, like, if something like that actually happened, where some sort of alien species or some sort of global catastrophe came, and the whole world had to become one unit and work as one unit against this external force, is that going to be possible, or is there always going to be like underground, subliminal like manipulation from Russia, China, the US, the UK? Like, would these different countries actually be able to get together and work towards a common goal, or are they always going to be serving their own self-interests?
I think they probably would, but that doesn't mean there won't be conflict right down. And you mentioned it there on the level of countries still having conflict between them. But I think the conflict kind of goes all the way down through countries. Inside one country, there'll be divides about beliefs.
Yeah.
Within individual parties, there'll be conflicts between groups of people and even individuals themselves. This was something that in The Ego is the Enemy, it kind of spoke about how during the World War, we just remember kind of the good guys versus the bad guys, like that type of thing. But he brought up the point that within like the Allied forces, for example, within the army, he was giving different examples of people who did great things and compared to other people who I mean, in the context of that book, they were obsessed with the ego. They would care more about their own personal status and their name getting written down in history more than they would about actually doing what's best for everyone. So he spoke about how on an individual level there'll even be conflicts between people. So yeah, I think, probably the world, if the world was under attack by an external force, that would make everyone unite. But there will always be conflicts regardless of that. Yeah.
I was going to say, could you give the example of climate change? Like, a lot of people would argue that isn't a force of nature that the whole world needs to collaborate on to reduce like the negative impacts it could have on us.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, like, a lot of countries just don't care. I mean, that's a thing that's sort of debate in my mind, because how much of it is under our human control.
It's a very politicised issue as well.
Yeah.
So there probably won't be a consensus on that issue in particular.
Yeah.
But
yeah, politics just seems to get in the way of everything.
Mm. But at the same time, so you have this conversation. So you initially asked, the initial question was kind of, can we agree on the same? Can everyone agree on the same thing? Like, what would be right? What's the right thing to do? Could everyone agree on that?
Mm-hmm.
And part of the reason why that's probably can't be done is kind of the same reason why different political beliefs exist, which is that. So one of the reasons is that there are an infinite amount of facts that people can draw upon, and it comes down to an ethical, subjective issue to choose which of those facts are most relevant. I learned this from Jordan Peterson's Maps of Meaning lectures. But basically, there's an infinite amount of facts, and how we choose to prescribe value to those is
infinite as well.
Well, the point is it's a subjective choice, so you can't say one fact is more important than the other. It's
right.
It's a philosophical and ethical issue, so you can't objectively say one thing or the other, which is the same with moral issues. But I guess political divides often come down to that because, for example, some people might value two values which people would believe to be good is justice and mercy. But you can't maximise for both of them. So in the face of a conflict between those two things, which do you choose to err on? Like, that's an ethical issue. And it would be the same with other things. You name any kind of decision where there's a conflict, where one thing has to be compromised for, that will come down to kind of a value judgment by someone. And I guess we could never agree on exactly what's right, because people have different values in that way, which can't be objectively determined.
Yeah, it's like the classic example in my mind is abortion. When does life begin? People say conception, people say 12 weeks, or when the baby starts heart start beating or whatever. It doesn't seem to be an objective fact that the life begins at X amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's so difficult.
Yeah, and with the abortion issue as well, it's a case of, so it's pro-life versus pro-choice. Mm-hmm. What's more important, the life of the baby or the freedom of the mother to choose?
Yeah.
So that's an ethical debate, and it's interesting because that would be pro-choice on the side of left wing, and pro-life on the side of right wing. But we take a different issue, COVID. Oh, I don't want to say that. The disease. I mean, we don't get monetised anyway. I just don't want it taken down. But with the lockdowns, so people are valuing preserving life over people's freedom. And in that case, the freedom is actually the right wing's issue. Mm-hmm. And it seems as if it was the left wing that were pushing for extra lockdowns. Yeah. And it's the same with the vaccine. Oh, the shot. It's the same as the jabs.
Yeah.
It's a left wing. It's people on the left wing telling you should get the jab. People on the right wing saying we should have the choice.
Yeah.
It's a funny thing people say. I've heard people say, yeah, they say it's pro-choice. Apart from the vaccine, you don't. You say it's your body, your choice. Apart from like it's a vaccine, then you have to put in the.
Yeah.
I hope this doesn't get taken down now. But
yeah, I mean, I completely agree with what you're saying about how the left seems to be pro-choice in terms of abortion, whereas the right is pro-choice in terms of jabs and like boosters and all these things. I don't know if we'll ever know this, but how many people do you think are pro-choice for, let's say they're a left-wing person, how many people do you think are actually pro-choice for abortions and then are like insistent that the vaccine should be mandated and compulsory? Like, do you think there is a lot of people like that?
I think you'd probably be surprised, to be fair, because with these political issues, people get very tribal. They pick a side and they're tribal about it. It's not about the actual opinions. It's not about the
principles they want to live by.
Yeah, it's just about what their tribe chooses. But I'd like to think, yeah, I mean, those are kind of extreme examples. But there will be people, like most people, who are pro-choice for abortions. Probably, you know, I don't know, to be fair. I don't know what percent, whether most of them would think, yeah, it shouldn't be compulsory to have a vaccine.
Yeah.
The trouble with the vaccines are, they're definitely going to get it's like, okay, you have a choice over whether to do it. Maybe they give you a choice over whether to do it or not, but you're not allowed to leave the country if you don't have one. It's basically compulsory if that's the case.
Yeah, I think that's it. Is that in Canada? They got some rules.
I think yeah, it was in Canada for a certain amount of time. I don't know if it's still like that, but
yeah, it's fucking crazy.
But yeah, we won't. We should probably stop there on the vaccines, I reckon.
Yeah,
I think we've said enough.
I mean, how much control should the government have over people? This is the thing, like how much of your freedoms are you willing to give up for security? Like in the UK, we've got fucking so many cameras everywhere, but it seems like we do a pretty good job of stopping a lot of terrorist attacks, possibly.
Yeah,
there's probably quite a few that definitely get stopped that we don't know about because they get stopped so early on.
Yeah,
obviously some still get through. Fair play, hard work and dedication. That was just a joke.
Yeah.
But like, how much of our personal freedoms are we willing to give up for this sense of security?
Yeah,
And is that right?
It's interesting you say that with the UK because I think, like, the UK, I don't think is necessarily the best example of that because crime rates, like, there's a lot of stabbings and shit.
Yeah.
You compare that to a country, like, a better example would be maybe either Dubai.
Yeah.
There's no knife crime, there's no robberies. Like, close enough to zero compared to here.
The UK, yeah.
But, you know, I don't know exactly how they achieve that, but one of the ways is extremely harsh prison sentences.
Yeah.
And perhaps they value less kind of the right to a free trial.
Right.
Like innocent until proven guilty. You know, I reckon if they have reason to, they'll just chuck you in and they won't necessarily consider that a human right.
Yeah, it seems like in those countries they might have no consideration of the individual circumstances that made that perpetrator do that crime. They just see a crime and see that crime equals that punishment.
Yeah.
Whereas I think in a more free society and Western democracies, I think it's a good thing. Like, it seems like court cases will look into the reason why someone has taken those steps and those actions.
Yeah.
And they'll give a proportional and appropriate sentence for why that person's done that thing.
Yeah.
But I think it's so much more important to really harshly punish someone that robs a bank just because they want loads of money and they're greedy.
Yeah.
More so than someone that's like robbing like a few $100s to go pay for baby formula, if you know what I mean. Because like the intentions do matter in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
but
that's
then
a tough one.
Actions ultimately are what causes harm and good in the world. So maybe they should be held in more high esteem.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a tough one because you kind of look at the results and it's like Dubai has basically no crime. England, in London, I haven't spent much time in London, but apparently you can't even walk around with a nice watch. It's basically guaranteed to get taken.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, fucking hell.
And that's kind of what people say. And obviously there's a lot of stabbings and muggings in London.
Yeah. I mean, it's because it's
does
such
not make it. What's the benefit of that?
True. But I mean, because it is such a big place, you are bound to get a decent amount of crime. There's so many people there, there's going to be more crime. Maybe the proportions are a little bit offset in the wrong way. So the percentage of crimes per 100 people, the number of crimes per 100 people might even be higher.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know statistics in that way.
Yeah.
But what those statistics, I mean. Like, I remember seeing a video of Andrew Tate talking about how he thinks the prison sentences in London and the UK should be like so much higher.
Yeah, I remember.
Make a prison in one of these desert countries and bring them all there, showcase that to people. And, like, that is a big thing that Nietzsche believed in. Like, he really did want, he really did harsh punishment, and he thought it was, what were his words? The highest form of pleasure that a human can feel is like punishing other people for the wrong they do. And he believed so. I don't know, actually, it might be taken a bit out of context because a lot of right-wing people like use him as an example of how people should live their lives and high punishment. But he said, like, it's the highest form of pleasure you can have, and it needs to be showcased in a public way. And like, when you think about it, it kind of seems a bit barbaric, like how they used to have public hangings and like all these executions that the whole village would get around and like gather for. But did it help crime, do you think?
It makes sense that it would. You know, I don't know. I can't say I know the numbers on it, but
yeah, like if you genuinely see what the fuck's going to happen to you if you do something wrong, you'd be like, oh shit,
yeah,
maybe not worth the risk.
Yeah, and I'd heard him say the same thing, and I did. You know, I'm not it made sense that would work.
It made sense to me. I don't know if I completely agree
stop
with it.
People. Like the point he was making that would deter people from doing it. You can't really argue with that.
Yeah.
So,
but then I guess that deterrence might not be enough if there is someone that is so desperate for something else. Like if they're so desperate for money, they're still going to need to, in their mind anyway, they're still going to need to do a crime in order to fund their living and like the living expenses of their family.
Mm-hmm.
And then like it's worth the risk of going to prison because the other option would be your family starving.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying there, but to be honest, I do think regardless of that, having harsher punishments would decrease the crime rate a lot. And I haven't fully thought about the moral issue as a whole. I'm not saying we necessarily should do that, but kind of makes sense now, just from what we said there, to do harsher punishments.
Yeah, I think I agree with that as well.
For certain things, at least.
Yeah, I think like if you're looking at, especially if you're taking the intentions into account, like if you're just looking at someone that stabbed someone randomly and it was just for no good reason, they should be punished harsher than someone who was not accidentally, but someone that stabbed someone in self-defense, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
I think self-defense certainly matters.
Yeah, like you should showcase the punishment of the person that had these really, really almost evil intentions.
Yeah,
and showcase what's going to happen to people if they do shit like that. And then that would also deter people that have good intentions and still do wrong things. Does that make sense? Yeah, very political just then, right?
Yeah, I kind of feel like on a podcast, it's not the thing I want to talk about the most because I think it can be very divisive and it's maybe not as useful or insightful for people. So, I don't know. I think, everyone's kind of naturally very religious as well about their political opinions. So, I'm not sure. Personally, I don't want the podcast to be all about that, but it's important to talk about sometimes, and maybe we'll get more views if we talk about controversial issues.
I mean, if we're exploring the moral issues of it, I think people would be willing to listen to it, even if they believe something completely opposite to what we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's if they're open-minded. If they're just...
I guess if they're not open-minded, then they can go and listen to something else.
Yeah, I don't want them fucking subscribed anyway.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. Please do. What's I going to say? I can't remember what I was going to say now.
Yeah.
But anyways, we were talking about like Glenn Villeneuve. I don't know how to say his name.
Yeah.
It seemed like he almost gave up these external vices and these he took complete control over what he could and decided to go out and live by himself.
Mm-hmm.
And he said one of the things I remember hearing him saying was the fact that he went out to Alaska and lived by himself gave him more freedom. But in my mind, I agreed with him, but it also restricted him in other ways. Like he had to forage every day and go and hunt every now and then and store his food, and he had to do these daily, weekly, monthly things to make sure he was able to survive and actually live.
Yeah.
So it was strange how he felt even more free by restricting his life in these very, very what's the word? Meaningful ways. Because if he didn't adhere to these disciplines that he now put on himself, he could die.
Yeah. Yeah, in theory, you'd be, for example, him having an iPhone would make him more free because he has the freedom to Google something that he's thinking about it. However, perhaps that's a case of though you might sacrifice. So in his context, I guess he's free from the expectations of society. So although his daily tasks might be, he might have to do certain things to survive. he's free from the expectations of society. And I think, yeah, that's maybe the key point for why he's free. And I also think by putting himself in this situation where he has the responsibility to do these things to survive, by taking on that extra responsibility, whilst he might sacrifice freedom over how he spends his time, I think in taking on responsibility like that, particularly when he's also kind of putting himself outside the expectations of society, whilst his actions are perhaps predetermined by what he needs to do, his mind is more free in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I hear that.
Did he elaborate anything anymore? Did he just say he feels more free? Did he elaborate on what that really means?
He didn't necessarily elaborate on it then and there, but another part of the podcast, he talked about how being able to just go out every day and like explore the natural land around him, and being able to just go and sit on a mountaintop and philosophize with himself is one of the things that gave him a lot of like meaning.
Yeah,
and that was like, wow. It made me go, wow. He had so much time on his hands. He could really dive into what it meant to him to live a life that's good and free and like meaningful.
Yeah.
But then also I thought, because he's probably packed light to go out and live to this cabin, he's not necessarily going to have stacks and stacks of books that are going to be able to teach him different things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can you learn? Quite a big question, I guess. But can you learn the way of life without guidance from other people? Like, could you learn the way of life through guidance of Mother Nature? Maybe. Like, I'd say he almost did that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a difficult question. I guess it comes down to the fact that maybe there's not one way of life. So perhaps to learn certain things about, if you think the proper way of life is to be the best possible jiu-jitsu athlete or something, in order to do that, you do need to learn from other people. If you just try and figure it out one step at a time by yourself, you're probably not going to do it. Even if you ask about it, like you have someone to spar to, the fact that there's been years and years of people developing techniques, thousands of people, millions of people developing techniques that work, like you just trying to figure it out but through testing out yourself, like you could just learn from other people. But I think you can, but the way of life, of the way perhaps living a fulfilling and content life, perhaps you could simply learn that through no external input, but just through experience, by taking a certain life path. Particularly if it's something, maybe there's something to spending time in nature, and nature can act as a teacher, and you're not distracted by external things. I think there can be an issue of, like, if you learn to live your life in a certain way from external sources, like books or whatever, then your thinking can actually become, I want to say corrupted. I'm not sure if that's exactly the right word, but someone can put an idea in your mind which isn't necessarily right. Yeah. Whereas if you were to figure out for yourself, then maybe there's less of a risk of being taken down the wrong path.
Yeah, because even if you learn something that is useful, the way that you understand it from a book or external source might not work the way that it needs to in your life.
Yeah.
Whereas when you learn it in your life, you're going to learn it exactly how it needs to happen for you, which is interesting. Because I remember hearing, I think it was Tristan Tate talk about how he doesn't really read books, and like, he says that he doesn't necessarily see the benefit of reading books. He believes in action and like going out and just doing shit.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, do you know who Naval Ravikant is?
Yeah. He
believes so much the benefit of reading books for hours a day. And it's interesting to see both very successful people.
Yeah, I understand why this. Yeah, I understand why, like, Tristan Tate says that, but to be honest, I I think the thing with the Tate brothers is they have an opinion on something, they state it as fact. Like, they always state whatever they think as if it's absolute fact, so there's no nuance there. And yeah, I do think I don't necessarily agree with them on what they believe about like books not being Bible, not being able to learn things from books, because the value from books, the argument would be you could try and figure everything out yourself, but that'll take a much longer time than if you can just figure it out through someone else's studying and through their thing. But it is an important point that it needs to be applied for it to really mean anything. But,
true.
But yeah, I guess you can never apply it unless you learn it in the first place.
Yeah, I guess in order to become knowledge, theory needs to be practiced.
It's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. It's interesting what you said earlier about, though, how if you learn something from a book or from some source, there is a chance of it corrupting your mind in a certain way. And I completely agree with that. And you were a little bit hesitant to say corrupt because maybe it was maybe too harsh of a word, possibly. Or I think it's quite appropriate.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say it's appropriate anyway, but I do know you don't want to give the idea that anything you learn needs to be questioned, so much so that you don't even learn it.
Mm-hmm.
I guess in order for something not to become corrupting in the long term anyway, you need to always be learning other things, and then the things you learn in the future may make you realise the thing you learned in the past was something that wasn't necessarily useful or correct. And then it's just a constant process of accumulating knowledge and like setting things right in your mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like I came to a similar realization about things generally, but I kind of learned it through jiu-jitsu, that because I would see online, or compared to my coach, like one of my coaches might teach me a certain way of doing a technique, and then another one of my coaches, or might have been a video or something, tells us to do it in a different way. And rather than there being a right or wrong thing, there's a reason why things work. So it's important to understand the why of what's right and wrong, why something works or why something doesn't, to apply it in different contexts, because there have been times where I've been taught complete opposite things. But they both work. One might end up being better than the other overall, but being able to understand the concepts, I think, is more important. Understanding why it works, not just what it is that works, because understanding it allows you to apply it in different contexts and allows you to understand why it works, when it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So it gives you a more broad understanding of it.
Yeah, it makes its application wider.
Yeah, so I noticed the same thing. I think after I realised that with jiu-jitsu, I realised the same thing about ideas. Like, I would hear ideas, like people I admire would give the complete opposite advice. So rather than just taking their advice at surface value, I kind of learned to think more about their advice. Okay, why are they giving this advice? One person says, oh, it's a good idea to go travelling. One person says, oh, it's a waste of money and you should focus on other things. Like, these are two people that I admire and think I want my life to be like them. So, if you don't understand the reasons why something might be true, then it doesn't give you any ability to apply it in different contexts and to actually take the meaning and apply it to other things. Yeah. So that's when I guess that could be where wisdom comes from knowledge. If you understand the knowledge on a deep enough level to understand the reasons why, that makes you able to apply it to different things. And perhaps that's what wisdom is. Yeah, I remember there's an old saying about wisdom. It's like, knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, but wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. Yeah, it's a good saying. It's really silly, but it makes a lot of sense now. Well, it made sense then, but
back then I was just a bit silly. It's not really that deep, but
Yeah,
fruit salad juice, very philosophical.
yeah. It's very wise of you.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to what we were saying about uni, like how uni, one of the benefits I've seen, I think you've seen as well, is just being able to understand what source you're hearing this information from, what their motives might be, and what this information actually means in different contexts as well.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's just it's always, I might say it before, it's just so annoying that you don't get taught that at university. Like the person that like made me realise that was Jordan Peterson. He was like, you go to university in order to be able to learn how to think critically and like understand what you think and what other people think.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas at uni, you just kind of taught this is this. To be fair, in third year, you do get taught that a bit, but it's not taught.
Maybe not explicitly.
Yeah, they're not saying it in terms of this will help you understand how to think better. They just say this will help you understand the sources better and get a better grade. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
that's good and all because you're at uni for a reason. You do want to get a degree. But like, there's something much more deeper about learning how to think as a human.
Yeah, and that's kind of like the academic application of what I was saying about, but that's taking information from sources, not advice from people.
Mm-hmm.
And something I've also learned about taking advice from people, and I notice it in myself when I give advice to other people, is that everyone gives advice kind of just based on their own biases. Like, so for example, if you ask someone about relationship advice, if you ask someone for relationship advice, the advice they give you might not, like, I'm not sure. It's difficult to tell whether it's good relevant advice because they might have had experiences, but if they've had experiences, then I guess it's just not turned on the plug.
The advice you get off other people.
Yeah, so that it might just be confirming their own decisions they made at that time. So rather than it being, oh, I've learned from the experience what the right things to do, so I can give you good advice, it's, I went through this experience and I made these certain decisions and I'm rationalising them by giving you this advice now because I want to think that I did the right thing.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that they actually learn what the right or wrong thing is.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've noticed this even in myself. Like when people ask me for advice about things or ask my opinion on things, maybe I start to give it and then I pause and think, you know, am I just saying this because this is the situation I find myself in and I'm rationalising why? Like why I made certain decisions rather than actually examining them whether they were right or wrong. So yeah,
yeah, I hear that. That makes a lot of sense actually. Do you think maybe the people that are the most certain in what they think about stuff might be the most insecure about it because they're trying to, like you said, rationalise the decision they made or the action they took?
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible. I think this was on Chris Williamson's podcast, the Modern Wind System podcast, on his recent episode, Lessons from 2022 or something. And he was saying that one of the things he's realised is that that it's easy to kind of be insecure about your own not so hard-held opinions about things because you see other people and they give their opinions about things and are absolutely sure that these things are right.
Mm-hmm.
And then you think to yourself, well, in order for me to be that sure about something, to be right, I must have really thoroughly examined it. That means they must have. When in reality, it doesn't necessarily mean that. A lot of people just hold really strong opinions. And they are often the people who are least trustworthy because the fact they have such a strong opinion isn't because they've thoroughly examined what they're doing. It's because they haven't, and they don't hold themselves to a high standard. They don't hold their beliefs to a standard where they have to rigorously go through it. The fact they have a strong belief is maybe more an indicator that they. I mean, it varies obviously in different people.
Yeah.
Obviously, some people hold strong opinions because they have thoroughly examined it.
Yeah.
But a lot of people hold them because they haven't.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a multitude of reasons why they believe it. But like a multitude of reasons why someone could believe something like either tribalism or riding the wave or just virtuous thinking, all these things. That's interesting there, what Chris was talking about, how just because you see someone be so certain, because we wouldn't necessarily ourselves be certain on that level unless we actually did believe it, we hold their belief to the same standard. I never thought about that. That's really, it's quite deep actually, because you just do, maybe not so much anymore, but when you're a bit younger, you just do hear people say certain things and they're just so rigorous in how they say it, and they're like so, like, you just have to fucking out shit, that must be true.
Yeah. Oh, it's even like, I'm thinking of some examples now. It's like someone just says an opinion, and it's not even, they don't even need to be like super intense or passionate about it. They just say it like with no doubt, like, oh, this is the way it is.
Right, yeah.
Even though it's actually just what they believe. But yeah, so it's easy to kind of just assume, like, without even going through the thought process of, oh, they must have really thought about it. Like, you don't even think that. You just jump to, it's kind of just subconscious and like, oh, right, they're saying that, then it must be true. They're saying it like that. Because, whereas, yeah, and it's probably for different circumstances. Like, you probably hold yourself to to rigorous standards for maybe certain things. Like, for me, I'd say I wouldn't necessarily take strong political opinions unless I've really thought about it. Whereas other people might just have their strong political opinions, but be more rigorous about other things. Whereas I might just have an opinion about something which I've never really considered as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just, I guess all of this is just you need to consider the sources and try and understand why people are saying the things that they say, not just what they say. And that can be in different contexts, just people's opinions or their advice to you or academic sources, when trying to decide what you believe yourself and who to be influenced by.
Yeah, I hear that. Would you say maybe a pathway to making, not necessarily, well, maybe say a pathway to kind of not falling into the trap of this ultimate self-belief and maybe disingenuously influence other people? How do you think you could go about that?
Yeah, it's a tough one because I think it's perhaps more. I'm not sure what I was about to say. I think it's more on the responsibility of the person who's listening to be aware of the source, but obviously you should take responsibility for what you're saying as well. Because what initially made me thought that was, like, someone's asked for your advice. If you have an opinion on something and someone asks you for their advice, and it's like, okay, I have these biases, but you've asked for my advice anyway, so I'll give my opinion. And you can take that for what you will. You don't need to take it as absolute truth.
Yeah.
So I guess stating things with more nuance will probably is probably helpful, and trying to just be aware and conscious of whether you actually have considered these opinions hard, or to think, actually, not feeling like you have to have an opinion about everything as well is probably a good thing.
Yeah, I think I've fallen into the trap of that before. I think I still do as well, but that's one thing I sort of realised a few months ago. And like, it just becomes tribalism, doesn't it? If you feel like you need to have an opinion on everything, you'll just revert back to which political group you think you agree with most, or like what philosophy you choose to follow.
Yeah. Yeah, this is something as I also heard on the Modern Wisdom podcast about how people will, the way they come up with it, someone will ask their opinion on something that they've never really thought about, and then they'll come up with their opinion just based on whatever they can think of at that point, and then that'll be the hill that they die on. In terms of that opinion, like once they don't really think of, like they get asked about something, they feel like they need an opinion, they decide their opinion, and then that's what they believe. And that's
That's how they're gonna die.
They're just gonna
Die by that truth they believe in. Do you think that's just an ego problem as well then?
Yeah, I think that's definitely an ego problem. Yeah.
Ego is the enemy.
That's what they say. Controversial though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there such thing as a healthy ego? Because surely you need to have some sort of level of ego to...
Yeah, well, that's the argument. Like, if you want, I feel like, for example, most athletes, for example, have some level of ego, which has driven them to try and be the best. But I guess it becomes a problem. There are a bunch of problems with that, but in terms of becoming successful, the problem would be if you've got this ego and you're arrogant to think I deserve something without having to do the work, it's where your ego doesn't match your ability. But I guess in some sense, a part of your ego might be, yeah, I believe I'm capable of achieving something. But if that comes with the small print of if I have to do the work to get there, then perhaps it's not that big a problem.
Yeah.
Although, now we're talking about this with the ego and the enemy. When I was reading, those sort of ideas in the book, I was thinking about how. So we spoke about the dopamine control system, which is basically. So you have two dopamine systems in your brain: the reward system and the control system. The reward system gives you pleasure and drives you to do things, and then the control system is for planning and calculation. So basically, we get the same. I think, on the surface, it seems like a good thing to activate your control system, but I think it can become an issue where you are gaining pleasure from planning and calculating without actually taking action. I think that's where kind of the ego, like if you entertain ideas of success and ambition, then you can actually get some gratification just from thinking about those things without actually taking the proper action. And although you're getting some gratification there, it doesn't really count for anything.
Right.
So that's certainly a way in which the ego is the enemy, building up that ambition and sense of self-worth without really taking any action. Like that can certainly be a problem for people.
Yeah, there's reward without effort, almost.
Yeah.
Is it a long book or is it a short?
It's not ridiculously long. I think it's like maybe 200 pages or something like that. Yeah, it's good, but maybe we'll do a whole episode on it at some point.
Yeah,
it's quite a good book. I mean, we spoke about some of the stuff which maybe at first I kind of pushed back on. Maybe probably was my ego pushing back on it.
Yeah,
but yeah, I think there is certainly some value on that. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah, that's good. I read. Anything else you want to discuss?
Could talk about Braveheart a bit, as it did.
Yeah.
It kind of links into some of the Stoic ideas, and I mentioned it at the start of the podcast. Although you haven't actually seen.
I've not.
I don't want to ruin it for you.
I thought I'd know what's going to happen just from seeing little clips over the years.
Yeah.
Do you want to say spoiler and tell me what happens?
Yeah, spoiler alert, guys. So,
what did you spoil the other day?
Fight Club. You were just explaining. You would just finish what you were saying, and then I would just go at the end of Fight Club. the narrator shoots, and then you're just like, yeah, spoiler alert. I'm sorry, I didn't give that one. It's kind of out of nowhere. But anyway, but yeah, Braveheart. I thought he really embodied some of the Stoic ideas of being simply aligned with doing the right thing. He had opportunities to avoid suffering.
This is William Wallace.
This is William Wallace, the main character of it. He had opportunities to avoid suffering and to gain personal status and gold and whatever. But those things were almost non-factors to him because he was so aligned with the cause of giving people freedom and not living in tyranny. He wasn't willing to compromise regardless of what ended up. You know, it ended up being the end of him. He got captured and killed, and even when he got killed, there's a spoiler alert now. Like, they took him away and they gave him the choice. They say, if you bow down to the king and admit that you're a traitor, then we'll give you a quick, painless death. And then if you don't, then you get a slow, painful death. And then he went for the slow, painful death anyway. So even in his dying moments, and there was a moment like just before he got, like whilst he was waiting to get taken out, and he just said to himself that he was afraid, and he was his character throughout the whole movie. He had been so courageous and seemingly fearless. That was a moment of true like humanity where he was afraid of the pain that he was feel, and he was afraid to die, but he had the bravery to go through with it anyway because he knew it was the right thing, and he wasn't going to go back on what he had led his people to believe in him for. He wasn't going to go back on that for the sake of, you know, avoiding some pain in his final minutes of his life. And I think as a character, it just showed so much integrity. But at the same time, although he was stoic and principled in his values, he still had passion. Like he had a wife that he loved, and she got killed, which was partly a motivator for him to go and fight the tyranny. That's kind of what spurred it off in the first place. But so he clearly had some passion and was not completely separate from the external world. But I think his ultimate desire was with his values, which is the most important thing, and probably how we should aspire to be.
Yeah. I remember we talked about it earlier, and we said it's almost better to lose your body than to lose your soul.
Yeah.
And like in that example, it doesn't really seem avoidable that he'd kind of be captured and killed. But maybe in like the example of that general that we talked about from Rome, could he have maybe like advanced his position in the army a bit more, and by doing so, he might not have been living by his values in that exact moment, but he's put himself in a better position, control and power, so he'd have a wider reach for the good that he wanted to do. Yeah. So what's the point in losing your body if you can't do any good because you're dead?
Yeah.
Like there's a very blurry line, a thin line to walk. Like,
yeah, it gets tricky.
Like you're going to try and stay alive in order to do the good that you want to do, but in order to stay alive, you have to go against your principles.
You know, I'd say it's too risky as a rationalization to say, oh, I'm going to go against my principles this once for the greater good. Like that doesn't seem, I don't know. I think that is still a form of sacrificing, of selling your soul to stay alive.
Yeah.
To keep your body. But from like a purely forget what the word for it is, but it's like a kind of a deterministic, maybe that's the word. From a deterministic point of view, if you do the right thing that ends up helping more people, then people would say that's the right thing. But then there's also the argument on the other side of that, which is there's like the line you should never cross. It's kind of, there's the example between, it's like a classic philosophical question. There's 5 people tied to a bridge, and you have the option to pull a lever which changes the train over to kill one person instead. Like, what's the right thing to do? I'd say the deterministic, I'm not sure if that's the right way to put it, but that would be, you should take the action to kill less people.
Yeah.
But then the other side of it, I forget what the word for it is, that there's certain things that you shouldn't do, and it's ill principle to do. So it'd be ethically wrong for you to do that. And,
right.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It's more wrong to kill a life than it is right to save lives. That could be like one way you could look at it, maybe.
Yeah, I guess it would be, or you shouldn't kill a life. You shouldn't kill one life for the sake of saving 5 lives. I'm not sure if that directly correlates to killing being more impactful than saving. But yeah, maybe it does.
Who knows?
But yeah, it's that classic kind of ethical argument. What do you think? Should someone like that go against their own principles for the sake of the extra good they could do in the future from staying alive?
I don't know. It's a tough one to say because, like, realistically nowadays, it's not going to be that many people in that position, is it?
Yeah, exactly. It's quite an extreme example.
Yeah, no one's going to be on the verge of death unless they go against the principles.
Well, I mean,
but then you could say metaphysical death in terms of their soul, maybe.
Yeah, well, you say that, but if someone in one of these more authoritarian countries tried to go out and speak for what they believe in, then they would get killed. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true, actually, especially in North Korea.
Yeah. So there are examples where it happens. And, yeah. It's a tough one.
It is. Yeah, I wouldn't know the answer to that question. Not for a while, anyway.
But I don't know. But in general, it does seem kind of philosophically right for me, in my opinion, for people presented with the chance to do the right thing. You can do the right thing and die, or do the wrong thing and live. I think you should do the right thing.
Yeah.
There's a story of, I don't know if you know, I think it's Socrates, very famous for this, but basically the people in power didn't like the message he was spreading. And he was basically told about this, and he was told that he was going to have this trial, and that he was going to lose this trial. But he was told this, and he was given the option to leave, but he chose to stay. And there's a quote from him, something to the effect of, "An unexamined life is not one worth living." And because he believed that, he stayed, and then he got killed for it. But he's kind of a pioneer of philosophy, particularly for that reason. He was maybe a martyr for the cause. And obviously it'd be great if we could do the right thing and stay alive, but it comes back to if you have this stoic attitude where you are able to detach yourself from wanting external things, even if one of those things is to avoid death. If you are properly aligned with the values that you uphold, and you do die, you'll die in harmony, and you'll die with peace of mind. and everybody dies. But some people, you get to choose. You get to choose how, and if you can do so, upholding your value, then maybe that's worth sacrificing the extra time you would have spent alive, where you've let your soul go, so to speak.
Yeah.
You've sold your soul to stay alive for longer.
Yeah, that's really... Would you say that's maybe one of the most stoic things that could happen? Because,
Yeah,
like Marcus Aurelius talking about how when his daughter died or something, and when you lose a loved one, like you said earlier, don't think of them as gone, just think of them as returned.
yeah, you haven't lost them; they've just returned.
Yeah, it's kind of like giving up to, bowing down to the power that death has, and just kind of letting go of its influence in your life. And the ultimate way to do that is just to let yourself die.
Yeah, and if you decide not to do that, then you'll forever be a slave to your fear of death in this context, and that will be above what you believe to be morally right. So you'll never be kind of this morally coherent person aligned with your values.
Yeah. That's the troubles of being human.
Yeah.
Understanding so much that we just...
Blessing and a curse, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. If only Adam and Eve never ate that apple. To be fair, all these biblical stories are pretty interesting. I like the stories you can learn from them.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Shall we wrap it up there?
Yeah. Yeah, good episode.
Yeah.
Interesting. Again. As always.
Yeah.
Always is.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching and listening, guys. Any final comments for you?
No.
We've said enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've dived into a few different things. It is currently 15:32, so 32 past 5 in the evening. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching if you watched. And check us out on Spotify. Higher Man Podcast. Please like and subscribe. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.